My guest tonight is Dr. Jennifer Daniels, a graduate of the University of Pennsylvania School of Medicine and Wharton School. She holds a medical degree and an MBA from those institutions, respectively. While in medical school and practicing medicine, she noticed that patients were not improving and often their conditions were worsening. She then decided to give the patients the option of, I guess, the standard care and natural therapies. And after that, she noticed after those patients chose the natural therapies that the death rate in her practice dropped from 4 to 0 in a year, I guess. In a
hmm
year, correct?
Immediately. The same
Immediately.
year I instituted the policy change, the death rate went to zero.
And she also found that she wasn't having any after-hour emergencies, and that's when she got into trouble. Patients were getting
Right.
better, and that's when she started to get the attention of the system.
Yeah.
So, Dr. Daniels, how are you doing tonight?
Pretty good. Pretty good.
I want to thank you for coming on. I wanted to talk to you today, kind of a general topic about Rockefeller medicine in general, allopathic care, the medical mafia, and maybe the big pharma and vaccines, and what the system is, what the medical system, what the broader system is doing to us. Is there
Right.
motivation behind this? Is it just greed, or is there something more sinister? And maybe we'll get into Obamacare. So, uh, tell us, quick. I guess tell us your quick story and how you got into this, and then we'll get into what is Rockefeller medicine and why is it so horrible.
Okay, so I guess what you're saying is how did I end up in Panama and how did I end up doing exclusively natural healing methods?
Hmm.
All right. Well, I started out life pretty ordinary, as you mentioned. I even went to Harvard University after high school. So I was all the way total establishment. Uh, Throughout the whole process, I was told that I was special, I was chosen, that I would be leading, and then they never finished the sentence, but as to what I would be leading, but I would be leading. And that in order to have, in exchange for this special privilege, all that was needed was total obedience to the truth as it was taught to me in whatever institution I was attending. And so, with that promise firmly understood, I realized that I was probably not ever going to really achieve much because I could see a lot of what I was being taught didn't really add up. And so, I made up my mind that I would master whatever information I was taught, but work very hard to improve on it because, again, what I was being taught was very confusing, and the truth is never confusing. It's generally pretty straightforward. So I graduated from all these fine institutions, and I was startled, stunned to see that there was no benefit that accrued to any particular patient. And I even went to the dean of the medical school to express my concern that I was going to go back to the inner city, take care of my relatives, neighbors, friends, and they needed results. This, well, you can collect malpractice if I mess up, or if you don't get results, this isn't really going to cut it because they don't believe in malpractice, they believe in getting even. So the dean finally suggested, well, you don't have to go back to that neighborhood. I said, but I want to go back, but I want to learn something that's going to help people get better. And so, of course, he urged me to get more training, just like when you can't get a job with a bachelor's degree, they urge you to get a PhD kind of thing. And so I eventually went into practice, opened up my medical office, and there could be no escaping it because I was solo practice. I was the only doctor providing care during the day. I took my own call at night. So if I prescribed a medicine at 10 a.m., patient had problems at 2 a.m., then I personally got the phone call. I was the one that woke up in the middle of the night. And so I had a policy. If I prescribed a drug at 10 a.m. and the patient called me at 2 a.m., I never ever prescribed that drug again. And so that went a long way towards me getting sleep through the night. But then I realized that these drugs were very, very dangerous. So I had a personal health crisis about 3 years before I opened my practice. And as a result of that, I went vegetarian, just cold turkey vegetarian. And in 24 hours, what I initially perceived to be a deadly condition totally resolved. And so when I entered practice, I noticed my patients were doing poorly. And I said, well, let me, share my enlightenment with them. And so I would give them a choice of a vegetable, dietary change, drugs, doing nothing, and different lifestyle interventions. And so I allowed people, I encouraged them to pick and choose. And I also told them, even if they did pick the drug option, look, if you get side effects, stop the drug. And most people don't realize that side effects are just an early warning that the drugs are killing you. And instead, they think of the side effects as something they have to endure to get a benefit, when actually that's not the case at all. So once I started giving people a choice, the death rate went to zero. But the other thing that happened is more and more people started choosing non-drug interventions. And so they profile your doctor as to how much of each drug he prescribes each month, and they compare it month to month, year to year. And so my drug profile had really gone flat, like a flat line on an EKG. And so I was getting threatening visits from the drug reps, from insurance company executives, phone calls, menacing phone calls from the hospital. And I was feeling a little uneasy as it was. And then a $30 million bank heist I became aware of. And I said, oh my God, this is just terrible. So of course I alerted the governor and the state education department and the mayor and everyone who might possibly be able to stop the process. And everyone said, oh, Dr. Daniels, don't worry. We got it under control. You practice medicine. I said, well, wait a minute. I have an MBA. I know how to stop these things. I'll just let the bank know they're being robbed of $30 million. So I contacted the bank, and the bank said, can't be. But they looked into it, and they said, oh my God, it is. And so they stopped the bank heist, and it turns out that the governor...
Was this a fraudulent bond issue or something? Or?
Yeah, it was a bond issue that had no collateral and no obligation to repay. So if you read all the fine print, then what it came down to was the bank had no collateral, and the government really had no obligation to repay it.
And who was the beneficiary of this money?
3 private citizens.
Oh, okay. One of those deals. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so the governor had already been bribed. So when the deal fell apart, he was not going to give back his bribe money, which he did not. And so he made a phone call to the licensing board. They sprang into action. And it took him a while, 6 years, to remove my license, put me on 2 do not employ lists and the terrorist watch list. And it's at that point that I realized I needed a new country. So I went looking for another country, and I picked Panama.
Huh. And so you were put on the terrorist watch list.
Yeah, I'm still on that list today, as well as the do not employ list.
And the do not employ list, I think that involves companies that are the direct or indirect recipient or beneficiary of federal contracts.
Correct, of any kind. It goes beyond that. If the government is a customer at all, for example, a hospital. If a hospital accepts Medicare funds, it can't hire me even as a janitor.
And this is done without any justification or due process or appeal, right?
Correct. Well, they told me I could appeal. I could write. So I wrote them a little 4-sentence thing saying, hey, guys, come on. And they said, we saw your appeal, and quite frankly, we're not interested. And so that was the end of that. And then I got another do not employ list. So that was one. Another do not employ list is I can't work for anyone who has a government contract or anyone who works for anyone who has a government contract. So now we're 2 generations removed from the government.
Yeah. So pretty much it's like 3 degrees of separation.
Yes.
And the terrorist watch list was, I know what's going on here. They can just arbitrarily, administratively decide to put you on the list, and you have no way to appeal, just a way to further marginalize you and intimidate you.
Correct.
Yeah,
Correct. Yeah.
yeah. It's just that arbitrary.
Totally. In my case, I don't think it's arbitrary. I think
I
they were
mean, arbitrary. I mean,
concerned.
yeah. I mean, there's no basis in law, or or there's
No, there's no basis in law, but if the government is at all displeased with anything that you do, or if you fail to obey, I'll just leave it at that, obey, then you can find yourself on the list. The goal, of course, is to put everybody on the list so nobody has any rights.
Yeah, I heard an interview did, and you're talking about how when you were on this list and you were subjected to higher scrutiny when you were traveling,
Hmm.
you're being treated better than most people are treated now.
Correct.
Yeah,
But I was being treated worse than the people of the day. So
yeah.
I was on a list back in 2002, 2003. And so I was being treated terribly. I was being pulled out of line. Female security was paged emergency to the gate where I was at. My baggage was opened and searched. And they weren't doing this to everyone back then.
Hmm.
But now they're doing the level of scrutiny I got back then is now de rigueur for everyone. So what they do is they just try it out. I mean, even the fact that people find it acceptable to stand by in a line for an airline flight and watch other people be searched and submit to searching themselves is is really what the problem is, that they don't realize where this is going.
Hmm. And of course, much of this is based on the 9/11 terrorist attacks. Allegedly, they were conducted by these Muslim terrorists.
Well, I
And
don't think it was based on the 9/11 attacks at all. I mean, I think there's evidence that this was all on the drawing board before those attacks.
oh yeah, I'm saying so as a rationalization for the
That's a
public.
pretense,
Yeah,
correct?
yeah,
It's a
yeah.
pretense.
I mean, I have my own opinions on the narrative and what
Hmm.
really happened or what didn't happen, but yeah, it's again, it's a conditioning process for the public to
Correct. Yeah.
condition to subject themselves to tyranny, just like in the aftermath of the Boston Marathon bombings, they went the door-to-door searches without any warrants.
Yeah, people open their door.
Open the doors, and if you don't defend your rights, you don't. If you don't have, assert your rights, you don't have any rights, and people are being conditioned not to do that.
Correct.
You know.
Correct. Yeah. You have all the rights that you can defend. All the
Yeah.
rights that you're willing to die for, those are the rights that you have. And so if you can't think of any rights that you're willing to die for, you don't have any.
Hmm.
No.
And very few people are willing to stand their ground, and that's the problem there. Right?
Well, it's not that, I mean, I don't think that's the problem. I think the problem is people don't realize that they have to stand their ground or they don't have any rights. Because once you realize you don't have any rights, there's a lot of power that comes from that. So people are lying to themselves, telling themselves that they do have rights, even though they personally do not intend and would not defend those rights.
Hmm.
For example, in medicine, we see this. So let's say you go to a doctor and the doctor administers some medication that's lethal and you die. Let's take this scenario. People have the feeling, the belief, false belief, that they have rights, that their heirs, their survivors can sue and get a malpractice settlement. What they don't realize is that most cases where patients die as a result of therapy, the doctor did everything by the book. In other words, the system is designed for them to be killed, to be mutilated, and to be harmed. So they really, as a matter of fact, do not have any recourse.
Now, this is the system that we've inherited, has developed over the
Well,
years.
it's it's in the process of being formulated, and every day it gets formulated. To say we've inherited, I think, is a little it's kind of passing the buck.
Okay. The now again, what happens is you were more or less run out of the business for improving your patient's conditions, but not going by the book.
Well, you can't improve their condition if you go by the book.
Hmm.
Yeah.
So that's why you were run out of the business.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. I mean, I was like playing football on a basketball court, you know. I was a trained killer. And I said, whoa, wait, whoa, I draw the line. I'm not killing anybody. I said, well, you're out of here.
Hmm.
And that's reasonable. Once you realize the system is designed to torture people and kill them, then if the doctor is not willing to torture and kill, then of course he should be removed from the system.
Mm-hmm.
And this
And
is what people fail to understand.
and the full weight of the system, the full force of the law is there to prevent you from providing any type of alternative care or natural care that might actually help your patient, and of course deny the patient medical freedom to make those decisions that they should when they're informed of the choices. They cannot do that.
Well, I don't exactly agree with that. So what I'm trying to say is the only decision the patient has with respect to the system is to participate or not to participate.
Mm-hmm.
It's actually unreasonable for a patient to go to a medically trained doctor and request alternative therapy of any kind. Why? Well, first of all, the doctor wasn't even trained in it.
Mm-hmm.
Number one. Number two, the system is designed, it's designed by the drug companies, by the hospitals, by the insurance companies for their benefit. So if you're going to a doctor and you have a goal in mind other than the benefit of a drug company, hospital, insurance company, then you're going to be frustrated and disappointed.
Mm-hmm. Here is a quote. Just bear with me. See
Mm-hmm.
what you think of this. The crisis in today's healthcare system is deeply rooted in the interwoven history of modern medicine and corporate capitalism. The major groups and forces that shaped the medical system sowed the seeds of the crisis we now face. The medical profession and other medical interest groups each tried to make medicine serve their own narrow economic and social interest. Foundations and other corporate class institutions insisted that medicine serve the needs of their corporate capitalist society. The dialectic of their common efforts and their clashes and their economic and political forces as set in motion by their actions shaped the system as it grew. Out of this history emerged a medical system that poorly served society's health needs. That is the introduction to E. Richard Brown's Rockefeller Medicine, and that was in 1979. What do you think of that summation?
I totally disagree.
Okay.
I think the issue is that there's not capitalism, that the patient, if you want to say so, is not a free agent consumer. That's the problem. The problem is these interests have used the police force of the government to enforce their monopoly. So it's because people can show up at your door with guns, apprehend grandma, accuse you of elder abuse because you didn't submit her to Rockefeller medicine. That's not capitalism.
Okay, so you're distinguishing, because people throw out the term capitalism, often what they mean by capitalism, they mean corporatism. But you would say the free market. This isn't a free society. This isn't people voluntarily contracting, getting the services they want. They're constrained by laws and regulations.
It's not voluntary at all.
Yeah.
Participation is not voluntary. That's what Obamacare is all about. Paying the money is not voluntary. And so, since there's not a voluntary component here, it's difficult to point to any kind of capitalism at all.
Of course, with the introduction of Medicare and Medicaid, that completely created all those distortions in the healthcare system. And also the tax code itself, which created the healthcare insurance industry, which was a response to the tax code, and also World War II.
Insurance predated that.
Yeah.
At Baylor College in Texas, before any of this stuff happened. What happened was the Baylor medical school, was having financial difficulties, and they were going under. And they had to figure out a way to save themselves. And so someone got the bright idea to figure out, well, who owes us money? And they found out their own employees were using the hospital and not paying. And that was the source of their financial ruin. So they got the employees together, pointed this out to them, and said, hey, look, why don't we take a little bit out of everybody's paycheck, and then whenever any of you needs health care, it will be paid for. And that was the birth of Blue Cross. And that was the very first, insurance company, health insurance company. And it was then, as we moved into World War II, wage freezes and stuff, that this concept had the opportunity to grow and spread.
The employer-based insurance scheme.
Employer-based, but the advance payment concept where you pay in advance. So these people were a certain amount taken out of their check every month before and even if they never got sick.
Mm-hmm.
So that is a concept that's very important because you cannot have a system that kills 880,000 people a year unless the people are being paid in advance and have the option of collecting that money after the person is dead. This is a very important concept. So if you are paying health insurance, anyone listening, then that means that your doctor can comfortably give you the lethal dose, kill you, because of course it's a standard of care, and he knows he will get paid.
And that incentive structure
Yeah,
produces these results.
exactly.
Yeah.
And people are, and I don't think that's capitalism.
No, it's not. It's definitely not. Again, it's definitely not the free market. It's this hybrid monstrosity. It's fascism.
Exactly.
Is a better
So
term.
I'm
Yeah.
saying you're a person who wrote that to say that capitalism is what the crisis is. Not at all.
Mm-hmm.
The real crisis is people's willingness to pay health insurance premiums with the fantasy, and it's a fantasy, that their neighbor is going to pay for their health care without them having to go talk to their neighbor and say, hey, I need some money. Will you lend me some money? I'll pay you back. So without them having to go through that uncomfortable discussion, they have this built-in system where now it's the government, but back then it was the employer would bully all your fellow employees, even the ones you hated, and get them to kick into the kitty for your health care.
Mm-hmm.
And this is the nugget. This is the linchpin of what's wrong. Is people's unwillingness to accept personal responsibility and willingness to steal from people they don't even know.
And that's how they're tricked into accepting programs like Obamacare or any other transfer scheme, whether it's Social Security or Medicare, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
But this transfer scheme is deadly. It's very, very deadly because, and the chief financial officers of all the hospitals, they know these numbers. If you ask them, they'll say, well, yes, that's true. Okay. So gross profit, hospital industry, 5%. So 5% of all the revenue they receive is profit. Well, okay. 1% of all the people who are admitted to the hospital die as a result of hospital intervention. Not their disease, hospital intervention. This is documented by the Medicare Inspector General. This is documented in many different places. That's a fact. What else do we know? If a person comes into the hospital and is discharged dead, deceased, then the hospital on average collects about 8 to 10 times as much money as if the person is discharged alive.
So it's
Okay.
almost like if you had an auto repair center that got paid more if the car didn't get fixed. You expect a lot of cars not to get fixed, right?
No, they get paid more if they take a sledgehammer to your car and totally disable it. That's what's called killing someone, okay? So this is not like you caught your car back and it's no better. Oh no.
I'm being too kind. Yeah.
Yeah. So if this is the ratio, then that 1% of people who die at the hands of the healthcare system while in the hospital are responsible for more or less 8 to 10% of that hospital's revenue, the hospital industry's revenue. So the hospital industry stopped killing patients tomorrow, they would collapse because their revenues would fall by 8%, wiping out their total profit.
I mean, that's a grim figure that I think that a lot of people have a hard time grasping. But that's the system. That's the system we're living under or dying under right now.
Dying under, but what I'm trying to explain is the only way it can work is if the hospital has the ability to collect payment after the person's death.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, it wouldn't work.
And are you saying this was done intentionally, or just this is a sort of a just how it played out with the various interest groups and incentives that were created over the course of several decades?
I think it's how it's played out with the incentives over the decades. And what's happened is in the 70s, hospitals started garnering a lot of money. I mean, a lot of money all of a sudden. And then the MBAs got involved. And so I was right there at the table, so to speak, when that happened. So from 82 and 83, I was in business school. And we had high level industry consultants teaching our classes at Wharton. So we got, I mean, the latest scoop. We got their long range 5, 10, and 20-year plans. It was incredible. But what they said, they were very clear, was they had crunched the numbers. So they had figured all this out, and they knew this. And so the last thing any MBA wanted to do was improve healthcare. Oh, no. No, 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 no. All we know to do is skim the money. And the thing is, how can you say skimming the money is going to harm anyone? Because the care is so deadly, the less anyone gets, the better. So there was no ethical conflict on the part of the MBAs. As far as they're concerned, they're probably saving a lot of lives, by skimming their share. And so what it's evolved to is the doctor, the only one in this mess who's brainwashed to save the patient, save the patient. It's for the good of the patient. This stuff really works. It's like, I do believe in fairies. I do believe in fairies. So the doctor who's got this mind frame has been sacrificing his income. And over the past 20 years, I would say from 1990 certainly to the present, 25 years, there's this fabulous income transfer from the doctors to the MBAs. The MBAs in the insurance industry, the MBAs in the hospital industry, the MBAs in the clinic, any care industry you want to think of, because the doctors haven't been trained in the math.
That's very interesting because look at Obamacare. That's the scheme behind Obamacare. It's this imposition of insurance, as if insurance equals quality health care, and it doesn't. But the law itself was written by, I think, Elizabeth Fowler, who worked for Max Baucus on the Senate Finance Committee. And she was an executive for WellPoint prior to going to work for the committee. And
exactly. Now, WellPoint is a subsidiary of Blue Cross.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And of course, Obamacare is just a huge wealth transfer at the point of a gun to the insurance industry, making everyone get insurance.
Correct.
Like you said, but you don't have I myself don't participate. I belong to a co-op with my family.
So what would a co-op be?
It's basically it's a thing where you pay flat fee a month, and it's a religious based, Christian based health co-op.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
And it's basically they fill out a form promising to live a healthy lifestyle and all that, and then they fill out. I guess they use some sort of actuarial to figure out what the premium is, but you send checks out to various people who need health care. They make monthly appeals, and you send the money out.
Mm-hmm.
And it's catastrophic. It's based, it's to protect you against catastrophic loss, which is what insurance should be, as opposed to third-party reimbursement.
Well, insurance should be voluntary. That's what it should be.
Oh yeah, yeah.
It should be voluntary.
Yeah, it's so bad they have to point a gun at you and say buy it. And you made a point today how a lot of people simply don't want health insurance. They don't want modern health care.
No.
And so this goes into the supposed 40 million, number we heard about, 40 million Americans not having health insurance.
They don't want it.
They don't want it. They're healthy. A lot of them are younger and all this stuff. And I think one thing you realize when you listen to people like you and other doctors, other people who are critical of the system, is that the more you hear about modern health care, you want to avoid it like the plague.
Right. It's a criminal enterprise. And why would you want to compel people to pay monthly amounts of money to a criminal enterprise for their own torture, mutilation, and murder?
Mm-hmm.
So of the people who go into a hospital, call it 100%, 1% are going to be killed because they went there. This doesn't include the people who die of their illness.
Mm-hmm.
But 1% are going to die because they went to the hospital. 25% are going to be harmed because they went to the hospital. And the remaining 74% don't benefit.
Hmm.
That's a pretty poor return.
Now, health, we associate longevity, uh, healthier populations, the eradication of disease with modern medicine. To what extent is that a myth?
100%, totally and
Okay.
completely. In fact, even today, modern times, right, 2015, there are these people in the United States who live 8 years longer than the average American. 8 years longer. And they are overweight, poor, uneducated, and don't have access to health care.
So it's the people who have healthcare in quotes, and they get all the
Well, get
drugs.
this,
Yeah.
health care, right? Health care, educated, trim and fit, all this stuff shortens your life expectancy, right? So
Hmm.
these people who are living 8 years longer, like I said, they're poor, uneducated, overweight, and don't have health care.
And I think you and many others have commented on the fact if you look at the I guess the drop in mortality and disease, and also the spread of disease, wasn't so much the application of vaccines or modern medicine. It was just the improvement in public sanitation and diet in the early part of the 20th century that brought about that revolution. Correct?
That's one thing. The other thing is, you can always change the way you count. You can't cure the disease, rename it.
Isn't that what they did with polio?
Exactly.
Hmm.
And I live here in Central America, right? So we had something called malaria. Remember that one? It's
Hmm.
a disease carried by mosquitoes, and you couldn't build the Panama Canal because of it. And so supposedly malaria was eradicated. I said, how can that be? Man, we got mosquitoes everywhere. And so we have this thing called dengue fever.
Hmm.
If you look up dengue, you look up malaria, the symptoms are absolutely identical. So what do? You can't eradicate it, rename it.
Or you can create a disease through various symptoms like AIDS. Correct?
That's another fundraiser. So what you
Yeah.
do is your mistakes you rename, even though it's the same disease, you just rename it. And then, if you need more revenue, you create a disease. AIDS is an excellent example. We have a disease that has no test, that has no objective findings. The definition of the disease changes every year. I don't know if anyone's noticed that.
And of course, this also creates a market for a drug that might have been shelved for its deadliness in the 60s, like AZT, right?
Correct.
Yeah. And of course, the people that died they died more or less from the treatment, or the inability to address what the real problem was their overuse of antibiotics, their lifestyle, their diet, and over their toxic. It was an issue of toxicity
It's
with these
pretty
people.
clear with AIDS that they did die of the AZT. So
Mhm.
they did an AZT study, and the results of this AZT study became apparent, or were released to the doctors anyway, in the 90s. It was shocking. So you have these AIDS people, and you put them on, you have two groups, half get AZT, half get placebo or nothing. So the first 2 years, the people getting AZT have a higher survival rate. And then all of a sudden, their survival drops like a rock. Boom! They just all drop dead. And the ones who weren't taking anything go on to live, 20, 40 years. And this is a study that the medical industrial complex itself did. And so it's very clear in AIDS that the death is not due to the underlying condition itself, but to the medications.
Yeah, and I also, anyway, as a layperson, these things can be very intimidating. But you want to when something is explained to you, then you spot a contradiction, and you're like,
Yeah,
well, this is wait, you just told me this is how it's supposed to work. Retroviruses,
right.
I understand they're not supposed to be pathological, correct?
I'll even take you one step further. Most viruses are not pathological and they are not deadly.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. And
So if someone says virus, the association is harmless. Virus, harmless. Virus, harmless. Worms, harmful. Virus, harmless. That's what should go through your mind because the way viruses reproduce is they have to enter a living cell.
mm-hmm.
They then take over the DNA, RNA apparatus of that cell to reproduce.
Mm-hmm.
They then, the cell is destroyed, the cell breaks open, and these viruses spread and they each find another cell. But since the virus is dependent upon a living cell, it forms a symbiotic relationship with the host. That's why viruses don't kill their host, because they need the host to stay alive.
So, HIV. Okay. HIV, which is something,
Right.
from what I understand, they've never isolated.
Correct. Never isolated.
Okay. So, based on their own standards, they're not following their own so-called
Correct.
scientific method.
There's
Never.
nothing scientific about it.
Yeah.
This is as scientific as a witch doctor shaking a rattle and doing a dance.
Yeah. But the
And what
person.
has happened
Okay.
in our culture is absolutely identical to the most primitive of cannibalistic cultures. And what has happened is each one of those primitive rituals, whether it's cannibalism, human sacrifice, human mutilation and torture to show allegiance to the king, um, ritualized rape, all of these things that we can so easily see in other cultures exist in our culture today, but they're shrouded in a white coat and in something called science.
Yeah, science and scientism. Yeah, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
the new religion. Um, I was the yeah. So with AIDS, so they say it's a retrovirus, correct?
Right.
But then at the same time they claim that's pathological, so they're contradicting themselves, right?
That's contradiction right there.
Okay, so they're not only do they not isolate the virus, they claim that a retrovirus is pathological, which contradicts their own
They
claim.
create a
Yeah,
fantasy characteristics for this thing called human immunodeficiency virus, characteristics that aren't characteristic of any virus. It's like the Ebola story. It just gets more grotesque and unrelated to any known scientific fact at all.
and yeah, you have these hemorrhagic fevers that are occurring in tropical areas, which
Right.
any number of things can cause, and they say it's Ebola,
But the
right?
same hemorrhagic fevers occur in the United States,
Hmm.
and it's called the E. coli zero, I think 017 or so the E. coli, the pathological E. coli causes hemorrhagic fevers and death. It creates the identical picture of Ebola,
Hmm.
indistinguishable set of symptoms.
But I mean, there are conditions like in Africa that are created by socio-political, geopolitical, jockeying, civil wars that are
Same thing in the States.
yeah.
Same thing in the States. 48 million Americans every year get food poisoning and gastroenteritis. And that's all that's happening over there is food poisoning. So their food poisoning is associated with sewage in their water. Our food poisoning is associated with sewage put in our food by food manufacturers.
Mhm.
And so what we're saying is we're civilized because we accept our gastroenteritis from people who sell it to us in grocery stores. But it's the same thing.
Yeah, yeah.
Both cultures have gastroenteritis. And what the Ebola plan is, you introduce the concept of Ebola into the United States. And there's 48 million people who get vomiting, fever, and diarrhea every year and don't die of it, by the way. The death rate is pitifully low. Um, they're going to just get reclassified as Ebola. It's going to be used as a pretense for an invasive
That,
police state, telling people who to have sex with, how to have sex, everything. And you notice with AIDS, they went straight to the sexual behavior thing, which has
mhm.
nothing to do with AIDS.
Yeah, yeah.
It's not even sexually transmitted. The condition, we won't talk about the virus, but the condition is not sexually transmitted.
Yeah, they had tests with couples that one couple was the male was diagnosed as being HIV positive, and there was no transmission.
Right.
Yeah. That condition itself, again, at least how I understand it, at least the research I've done, is that basically you had these people who, a subgroup, particularly these promiscuous homosexuals who were active in drugs and they were taking antibiotics and these poppers and just they more or less
We can
just.
leave out the promiscuous part because it's nothing to do with the transmission.
But didn't it lead to like overuse of antibiotics?
No, the overuse of antibiotics was a ritual thing. These people felt, well, if I take antibiotics prophylactically, then my
Yeah.
sexual behavior is okay. But the truth of the matter is, prophylactic antibiotics never did work. I mean, they tried it out for heterosexual prostitutes. It just didn't work
But
out.
wouldn't it at the same time gut your immune system though?
That's what I mean. That's why it doesn't work out because
Yeah,
the
yeah.
antibiotics destroy you more so than the disease you're trying to prevent.
Mhm. So again, it's one of these things where it was a toxic environment, uh,
Correct.
straining your
The
I
immune
guess
system.
the immune system, and it wasn't this exogenous mysterious virus that apparently came from a monkey in Africa or
Right.
yeah,
But
yeah.
let's take this let's be totally logical about this. So we're talking about AIDS. It's an acquired immunodeficiency syndrome. So it's an acquired deficiency in the immune system,
Hmm.
right? So the immune system, it was competent, say at birth or some point in life, and then it fails. Anyone who gets an infection has AIDS because their immune
Yeah.
system was temporarily incompetent. Anyone who develops arthritis has got to have AIDS because their immune system was supposed to handle that. So the fact that we selectively acknowledge that it's AIDS only when the person is a homosexual and promiscuous, which are like emotional buzzwords to create anger and dislike in the population. So then what happens? People say, oh, it's okay for the government to treat them this way or to
Hmm.
treat them that way. And the government should force them to get tested and force this and force that. And no one realizing that this is just stuff being put in place to force you.
Yep. And there are people who were put in jail because they were HIV positive.
And they had sex with somebody and
Yeah.
didn't use a condom. Yeah.
And there's no basis in science and anything to justify that conviction.
Nothing.
It's just really,
Even
yeah,
observation.
yeah,
Nothing at
nothing.
all.
I mean, that's the police state aspect of this, and that's what you have to remember. Um, so again, AIDS. This is before we get on to Rockefeller medicine in general and how it got started and why it took control and maybe the business
Mhm.
interests about it. This how about Cancer Incorporated?
Yeah. So the truth about cancer is that at least half of people who are diagnosed with cancer do not have a life-threatening condition.
So the doctor tells them they have cancer, they don't have, or a life-threatening condition. And this is, I think, where you said you have to read the pathology report.
You have to read the pathology report. Yes, you have to read the pathology report.
Now, and this is the doctor doing this just for pecuniary reasons, or is it just
No, it's the standard of care. If he
standard of
doesn't
care?
do this, he's out in his keister. And when I was a doctor, as family practice doctor, as soon as someone had a diagnosis of cancer, I had to immediately turn them over to the cancer specialist. I couldn't give them the honest talk, which was, you might have a better life and a longer life if you skip all this cancer therapy. I was not allowed to say that.
Yeah, there was an interesting statistic I heard a couple of months ago when you remember Suzanne Summers,
Yeah.
the actress, she was diagnosed with cancer and she just chose a natural remedies, I think. And
Wait. You got to get your facts straight with
yeah,
Suzanne Summers.
but she ended up not having cancer, right?
Suzanne Summer never had cancer of any type.
Yeah, that's what I was about to say. Yeah, she didn't have, but she was diagnosed with it, correct?
I don't know what the conversation was, but Suzanne Summers never had cancer.
Okay,
She had DCIS, which was almost breast cancer.
okay.
Because of this, she was intimidated into getting a lumpectomy slash mastectomy. We'll just call it surgery.
Mhm.
She had the standard of care. She did not handle that naturally. Now, maybe she took some natural stuff,
Yeah.
but she did the full standard of care for that almost cancer.
Hmm.
Then she got into marketing how I cured my breast cancer that I never had. All right, cool, no problem. Everyone, has their day. And she just went a little too far and said, I cured myself with bioidentical hormones.
Hmm.
That's cool, but did you know that bioidentical hormones are the same ingredients that are in the birth control pills? Doctors have been prescribing bioidentical hormones for at least 30 years. But
But
you'll never hear this in the advertisement.
yeah,
Okay, so she takes her own bioidentical hormones. How do we know? Because she gets almost uterine cancer.
yeah.
Almost uterine cancer. And what does she do for her almost uterine cancer? The standard of care. She gets a hysterectomy, gets her uterus yanked out, and then says, I'm handling this naturally. Okay. Well, you know what I'm saying? The whole story doesn't add up. So
Yeah.
who knows which is the next cancer she's not going to get, but will cure.
Hmm.
Yeah.
But there was I think it was the American Cancer Institute that came out and said, well, 25% of people will live without any intervention at all. I think they said something to that effect.
Yeah, they always confess to half of what it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But begs the question because
Yeah.
there's survival. If you live 5 years one day, you're a cancer survivor. Then you die the next day. It doesn't, it's
Yeah,
okay.
you've been cured.
You've been cured. So
You've been cured.
I mean, a lot of these cancers, I mean, that 25% figure is a lot better than a lot of what these patients go through. If you really think about it, if you go past that 5 year threshold. So
Well, the other thing is, what about your 5 years? What about the misery of the chemotherapy and long-lasting side effects? For example, the standard of care for breast cancer is adriamycin. We used to call it red death
mhm.
in medical school. It's called red death. Why? Because it killed people. But anyway, women are getting that, and it causes damage to the heart. So what are women doing? They're getting chemotherapy for breast cancer. 35% of women diagnosed with breast cancer die of breast cancer. At least 30% die of heart disease,
Mhm.
which is a complication of the therapy.
Yeah. So uh, with that treatment, with the treatment regimen, is again when they're dealing with cancers, they're not dealing. They either poison you, or they cut you apart, or they burn you, which is the standard care for cancer still,
Right.
right?
Now, the rationale behind that is cancer is such a deadly disease that we have to use even more deadly drugs. And if the drugs kill you, it's okay because you would have died even sooner of your cancer had you not received therapy. And this is what we doctors are told in medical school. So a cancer death due to therapy is a good death.
Yet there's no investigation into what causes the cancer. I mean, there's no real all the fundraising, pink ribbons, and March for the Cure. It's got nothing to do with finding the source of the cancer and the cure,
Well,
which
as if that's their responsibility. Again, this is another fallacy. The problem's not the system. The problem is the people using the system. It's like expecting a lizard to fly.
mhm.
You know, these people are there to make money and to enrich the hospitals, drug companies, and insurance companies. And you're going to expect them to look for a cure?
Mhm.
I don't get it.
And something like the American Cancer Institute, or the cancer.
Right.
These are these are multi-hundred-billion-dollar endowments, and they're a business, and their
Yeah.
business is to support the current system, and the current system has so much money invested in buildings and hospitals and diagnostic
No, it's
machines.
it's it has
Yeah.
nothing to do. It's not designed for health, and they don't care. They just use the name healthcare as a propaganda thing.
Mm.
It's like I'm new here to Panama, right? So I didn't understand the culture when I first came here. I didn't understand the language either. So it's just this Panamanian is trying to help me get things done. I get my phone, get this done, blah 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 blah. And then there's this blaring announcement. I said, Enrique, what are they saying? What am I supposed to do, Enrique? What do I need to do? And he says, Oh, doctor, don't worry, it's just propaganda. And so I feel like saying to people, "Oh, don't worry, it's just propaganda."
Mhm. Well, like I've heard some people talk about the source of cancer, what really causes it, and basically what understanding how cells work. The mitochondria, which operates if it gets the right amount of energy. So what a cancer is you have a cell that aren't getting their energy deprived for, I guess, because of oxidation, I guess.
Yeah, all this stuff is just playing into the medical industrial complex.
Hmm.
And if you adhere to these theories of cancer,
Hmm.
this microscopic cancer theory, then what you're going to do is end up um, submitting to chemotherapy or submitting to equally draconian natural methods, so to speak.
Hmm.
So the real bottom line is how do you prevent cancer? And oxygenating your cells is not the answer. The
Hmm.
answer is simply get the chemicals out of your life. These chemicals are entering your body and killing and destroying your cells. You can flood your cells with all the oxygen you want, but if you're subjecting them to hydrogenated foods and plastic foods and stuff, you're going to get cancer. Things are not going to go well with you. Now, the other thing is cancer is not the most deadly disease out there. Congestive heart failure kills more people. Pneumonia has a 10% death rate per year. So, what they've done is taken an illness that is not a death sentence, that is not deadly, and condition people to believe that it is.
Hmm.
So the real truth about cancer is if you're diagnosed with cancer, there's a 65% chance you're not going to die of it. So
But
why don't you go turn your attention to the other 65% of things that are really going to be the problem?
mhm.
So if it's almost like getting a diagnosis of cancer is a negative prediction.
So, but if you do subject yourself to the standard care, what are your chances?
Well, your chances of being
Yeah,
mutilated are 100%. Your
yeah.
chances of being tortured are 100%.
Hmm.
And so then we get into ritualistic torture, mutilation, and human sacrifice.
Hmm.
Only now we've dressed it up with technology. And
Hmm.
so it's the same primitive ritualistic behavior. And so we as human beings have to decide if we would like to be a part of that.
So, if you were to go the route where you want to cleanse your system of the toxins, but that
Right.
requires that would require people to have a fundamental shift in their lifestyles and what their expectations are, and they don't want to hear that.
Well, I think they do. Because
Hmm.
people are doing all kinds of things. I mean, they're taking aspirin a day. They're submitting to sodomy with the colonoscopies. Women are submitting to ritual rape every year. It's called a pelvic exam. People want to do whatever is going to be helpful.
Hmm.
So there's no lack of willingness on the part of individuals to do something. But what they don't understand is they have to decide what to do.
Hmm.
And as far as the cleansing goes, I mean, you can do something as simple as just have one day a week where all you do is juice. I mean, this is not rocket science. No one's asking everyone to go vegan organic tomorrow. In fact, if you look at people who are 90 years old, 80 years old, they're not health nuts. They're not the vegan organic crowd.
Hmm.
So we have to take a measured view towards all this stuff. You want to eat regular, real food. And the question is, what is real food and how do you get it? And the answer is you have a backyard garden, your buddy has a backyard garden, and you switch. And if you want to have meat, well, you throw a chicken out there, let them scratch around, and you sacrifice them after 5 weeks.
But yeah, yeah. Again, this is again, it's completely contrary to the modern lifestyle that most people lead, at least here in the United States, where they go to the grocery store for all their food and everything's
Exactly,
prepackaged, and
exactly. That's right.
you know,
Yeah.
and I think if people were getting this advice, from the medical profession or people who were, so we say, focused on treating people's health and making them get better, it would dawn on most people that much of the expertise that we pay for with medical schools and through our insurance premiums and we don't need, right? So
Well,
that's
it's
why,
not. It's worse than not needing it.
yeah.
It's against our health. It's
Mm-hmm.
it's killing us. uh, you know, Almost 40% of Americans die at the hands of the healthcare industry. That's a pretty high kill rate.
Mm-hmm.
So if you die, it's a 40% chance the healthcare system, your doctor, did it.
Well, how about what's your view on vaccines?
Well, the purpose of vaccines, again, is just ritualistic submission.
Mm-hmm.
And so you know how one wolf will show his neck to the dominant wolf of the pack? That's exactly what it is. It's a gesture of submission. It's a gesture of trust and allowing yourself to be harmed, to be vulnerable, to be tortured in order to occupy your particular rung on the ladder. No, you're not going to be head honcho, but at least you'll have a place on the rung, maybe the second rung from the bottom or so.
Mm-hmm.
And that's all it is. I mean, immunizations are a condition of going to school, a condition of getting a job. So in order to get goodies, you have got to submit to this ritualistic torture. Now it gets a little more sinister when you think that nobody knows what's in that shot. Your doctor does not know what's in that shot. No clue. I know because I was a doctor, and they did not tell us what was in that shot. All they told us was one, we had to give the shot, and two, if someone dropped dead from the shot, that we were free of all responsibility. Why? Because this is again the propaganda story. Because a shot is so valuable, it's so beneficial, it's going to save so many lives that the occasional person that drops dead from the shot. So here they are, they're admitting the shots kill people. Occasional person that's harmed by the shot is worth the benefit to everybody else.
The greater good.
The greater good, yes.
Yeah. So I mean,
So let me just take that one step further then. So if nobody knows what's in the shot, and the leaders, we'll call them our rulers, have everybody conditioned to show up every year for a shot, every year for a shot, every year for a shot. They can literally decide who to kill by putting something in their shot.
and it appears they've done
Just
that.
Yes.
With the polio vaccine, the SV40 virus, and not to mention.
Oh, even further, there was a flu shot that was given last year at a nursing home. There are 77 people. They all got the flu shot. I think 12 people died.
Yeah, and of course was it Sabin?
Yeah.
Sabin, who was he developed the first vaccine, which was a disaster, which people don't know about. It was Sabin, right? Or was it Salk?
No, Salk. It was Salk. Jonas
Salk.
Salk that vaccinated his own kid to death.
Yeah, Salk. But
Yeah.
Salk himself had written he was an advocate of population control and eugenics, correct?
I'm not sure
Yeah.
if it was or not, but a lot of these medical people were, which is, you have to wonder, trusting your health to someone who believes in killing people.
Yeah, and there's a video with Maurice Hillman laughing as they talk about how they laced the vaccine with the simian viruses.
Yeah, I saw that.
Yeah. And that was taken out of it was on a PBS special, and that was edited out of it on the Modern Health back in the 90s, and that was edited out of the final cut because they were all laughing as they talked about it.
Yeah.
So you might have some real sinister intentions here. Of course, if you look at the people who have founded the World Health Organization, and a lot of these great United Nations, you get into the Rockefellers, and we're getting the Rockefeller medicine. How did Rockefeller medicine become ascendant?
Well, the Flexner report was a pivotal thing. So what happened was Flexner was a PhD research person. He was funded by Rockefeller, basically to write a report denouncing any and all forms of healing as deadly and phony unless they were from the pharmaceutical industry, which of course Rockefeller was creating at the time. And then once he had this report, then the government was influenced to put its police force behind this report and arrest, incarcerate, and prevent from practice anyone, such as midwives and chiropractors, who were not practicing this form of healing that required, Rockefeller produced products.
And it was basically an attempt to push aside or do away with naturopath or homeopathic ways of
everything,
and imposing allopathy, which is heroic medicine, or surgery, drugs, petrochemically based drugs. That's an important point, right? Petrochemically based drugs. And what was Rockefeller known for?
Oil, yes.
Yeah. They did the same thing with agriculture.
Yes. The fertilizers.
So we're talking full spectrum dominance here.
Exactly. And I think people need to understand that that's all it is dominance. It's not about the money, because Rockefeller had all the money.
Yeah.
It's about having control over people. And so if you can get people to follow the money, and you have all the money, then you have them going in any direction you want them to go into.
And with his money, when he got into banking, and they created the Federal Reserve and imposed debt-based fiat money, which is another cancerous form of influence on society, eats you out from the inside, literally does, with debt. But he started colleges or funded colleges, so he changed the entire educational system.
And you had compulsory education, and that's really the central piece that made everything possible. Because with compulsory education, you separate the child from the influence of his parents. And so children didn't get the healing knowledge that their parents had, and each generation lost more and more and more. And I would say in my family, I actually went back a few generations and reclaimed all of that knowledge.
Hmm.
So that so I now have personal healing independence where I don't need health insurance and haven't had any for over 20 years, where I don't need to go to the doctor. Or if I have a problem, I just solve it myself for anywhere from 10 cents to $10.
Hmm. Now, there is some value in, say, maybe like trauma surgery and things like that.
No,
But you don't
no,
see any value in that, like where they can fix a
no,
bone or something?
no, none. Because there's a secondary market for organs. And so if you end up in a car accident and you sign the back of your driver's license to be an organ donor, it can be a fender bender, and your parents, your relatives will get a call from the hospital that you're brain dead. They sign the forms and you've been sacrificed.
Yeah, I've heard about that, how it's very doctor.
Well,
Yeah,
it really does happen,
yeah.
and it happens a lot. And so you balance those lives that have been taken to what lives might be saved in trauma, and the choice is clear.
Hmm.
First of all, a lot of those so-called trauma patients were going to get better anyway had they never had any medical intervention.
Hmm.
I'll give you an example. My mother and father and my brother were driving to visit me. I was selling books door to door in Ohio, summer in college. And so they were driving down the road, and this drunk hit them head on. This was in the 70s before seatbelts. And so mom broke her knee and broke her nose, and everyone else got a little bit of damage, but really nothing much. So they scrape her up off the cement or whatever out of the car, take her to the hospital, and they says, you know, we'll see if she's alive by morning. Maybe we'll do something. So she was alive by morning, and they did do something. And what they did was totally unnecessary and had to be undone by later surgery 10 years later because she had chronic pain.
Hmm.
So that's the truth about trauma surgery. And as a person who trained at a teaching hospital, I've seen car accident cases come in with trauma. I honestly can't tell you one case of trauma where we made a positive impact on that person's health.
Wow. I mean, that's. I'm trying to grasp something redeemable in the system. Like,
There's nothing. I've
no,
looked.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. I thought, oh, I know, orthopedic surgery, break a bone, go get it fixed, right? And so I looked up each broken bone, hip fracture, elbow fracture, wrist fracture, ankle fracture. There's no advantage to having it fixed surgically as opposed to just putting a cast on it. And a cast does not need to be applied except within the first week.
Hmm.
Doesn't need to be applied on the spot. So a broken bone is not a medical emergency.
So, what type of care would you recommend if someone were to suffer an injury like that?
Say broken bone.
Yeah.
I would recommend they get some comfrey. In fact, the name of the plant is knit bone. Why? Because it makes bones heal quicker.
Hmm.
And so you just basically take some comfrey. What I did when my kids had a sports injury in high school was I took some comfrey leaves, put them in a blender with some water, and then boiled it, made a tea, made a poultice, wrapped it around their joint with an ace, and they were walking and fine the next day.
So you're saying is you're aiding the body in its natural healing powers.
Correct.
Yeah.
And the doctor, by taking the bone, pulling it apart, twisting it, putting screws in it, is actually delaying the healing process.
Hmm. Wow. Now, how about like a compound fracture?
Now, when you say compound fracture, you mean it's coming out through the skin?
Yeah, protruding. Yeah.
Yeah. Again, it's the same thing. You just go ahead and if you got the nerve, you clean it up, and then someone applies traction, pops back in, and two bones only need to be within 2 inches of each other, and they'll heal together.
Wow.
So your body will actually make a bridge, healing the two bones together. So most people can get on their own ends of the bone within 2 inches of each other.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Uh, so, uh, so remember when we say Rockefeller, we're talking not talking just one man or one family. This is
No,
an entire system, and elite.
it's an entire system, but
Yeah.
also we have to take personal responsibility. If
Hmm.
you work at a hospital, you're part of the killing. If you work for an insurance company that writes health insurance premiums, if you work for a drug company in any capacity, even if all you do is write the commercials, or if all you do is read the commercials. If you're a newscaster and you're reading the evening health segment written by the drug companies, you're all part of the killing. If you're a teacher teaching health class with the curriculum written by the drug companies, you're part of the killing.
Hmm.
And I think each one of us needs to take a hard, close look at our lives and say, how are we advancing the killing? And how can we stop doing that? Just each person take a look at their life and say, I refuse to participate in murder. And that's all I did. All I did was say, you know what? You know, I'll do anything, just about, but I draw the line at murder. I'm not murdering anybody. That's one thing I'm not going to do.
Hmm.
And you'd think that wasn't much of a line to draw, right? I mean, I was willing to do anything. I wasn't going to murder. I wasn't going to falsify anything or lie. That's it. Anything else, I'll consider it.
That reminds me of the John Taylor Gatto.
Hmm.
He was, I think he won the Teacher of the Year in New York for 2 years in a row.
Yeah.
And he, interesting enough, he began his teaching career on using someone else's license.
Yeah.
so, so it's kind of, but in his speech, I think he finally said he got sick of ruining kids' lives, so he couldn't
That's
teach
right.
anymore. Yeah, and that's kind of it's a similar, I think, epiphany that he had and choice that people have in these things. Um,
And you see what happens. So John Taylor Gatto left the system, and what happened? He made as much or even more money outside the system as in the system.
mhm.
And most people are conditioned, again, this is conditioning, to believe that they are actually going to make a financial sacrifice by walking away from the system. And it's quite the opposite.
Well, again, because it's that money, the money trick they use on us, right?
No,
Yeah.
no, you're actually going to make more money walking away from the system.
Hmm.
Most doctors now, even at 200,000 a year, cannot pay their bills because their educational loans are so high and interest rates are so high.
Hmm.
And that's the truth. So the system brainwashes you into believing it's your best option when it almost never is.
Hmm. And with running a practice, you're just overwhelmed with paperwork and filling out codes for billing, and so much is administrative. And that's time away from your
No, no,
patient.
no, 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 no. Okay, so I had a private practice, but I realized just what you said. I said, I got to find a way around it. So what I
Hmm.
did, I went to business school while I was going to medical school. I said, I've got to figure this out. And while in business school, I figured it out. I need to automate. I need to accept cash. That's it. And that's what I did. I automated. I accepted cash. And this was 1990 to 2000. I practiced for 10 years. And my income was as high as $200,000 a year. That's after expenses and
So,
before taxes.
so you're a fee for service.
Yeah, which
Yes.
most doctors are.
Yeah.
But what I'm trying to say is by refusing insurance, by refusing to work for a university, I actually made more than three times what the average family practice doctor in 1992 or 93 was making,
Which exposes the parasitical nature of those systems.
which exposes a lie
Yeah.
that people are being told that their reward for conformity will be increased income. It's not true.
Hmm. So if you just run a practice, focus on the patient, get rid of all this overhead, this dead weight bureaucratic stuff, you can
Right.
run a practice much more and improve the lives of your patients.
And people will pay you. They'll
Yeah.
actually pay you. They'll say, I want to make sure you get paid. Look, I'm having financial problems. I'm going through bankruptcy. I haven't submitted your bills. I'm going to make sure you get paid and I'll pay you. And they do.
Hmm.
Or people will go to church and pass the hat to collect enough money to make sure my officers got paid. Or people, grown people, their parents would say, here, take my charge card and go see Dr. Daniels.
Yeah.
So people will pay you if you take care of them, if you give them what they want. And people don't want to be killed. They don't want to be mutilated.
Hmm. And that system that you just described, that voluntary system, also it encourages a sense of responsibility and obligation on the part of the person to be responsible for himself and also pay you. They don't have a sense of entitlement.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
So
But this is what people have been tricked or conditioned into believing is that your health is too big a responsibility. You can't possibly handle it. And it's just the opposite. Your health is such an important responsibility that nobody else can possibly handle it.
Hmm.
But
And,
it's something you can easily handle.
mhm. And like you, I think you've talked about this, and others have talked about this, the importance of just having a healthy diet, balanced diet, in avoiding illness. Um,
You know what? I'll even go so far as to, I'll concede that. I'll say, don't even worry about your diet. Just stay away from the doctor. Just stay away from pharmaceuticals. That's 40% of all the causes of death.
mhm,
Think about that. If all you do is don't have health insurance and don't go see the doctor, you've eliminated 40% of the things that could kill you.
mhm.
That's a huge elimination. And these people in the United States who live 8 years longer, they're Hispanic immigrants. So Hispanics who are not born in America but immigrate to America live 8 years longer. And you cannot attribute it to their country of origin because the life expectancy in their country of origin, without exception, is less than life expectancy in the United States.
Mhm.
So that 8 years of increased life is simply attributable to the fact they don't speak the language, they're not educated, so they don't get the propaganda message. And because they don't have money, they can't afford health care and they don't have health insurance. It is simply that they don't believe the hype or don't get the hype because they don't speak the language and they don't have access to health care.
Mhm.
And if people who have money, who have choices, exercise that choice, as they say, be more Hispanic. Enjoy yourself, gain some weight. Um, don't see the doctor. Ignore any and all health service announcements and don't have health insurance. That's it. And Hispanics, what's Hispanic? It could be anything. A person could be from Spain, it could be from the Caribbean, it could be from Cuba, Puerto Rico, Mexico, Guatemala. These cultures are diverse. They have nothing in common, except when they come to the United States, they don't speak the language and they don't have an education. But once the Hispanic person is American born, so their next generation, born in America, does not experience health benefits.
Mhm.
They don't
Which,
experience the health and longevity.
mhm.
And again, it's because that generation is acculturated. They speak the language, they believe the propaganda, they participate in the health system, and their health suffers accordingly.
Well, you do live in a system where banks don't have any money in them, and the money isn't worth anything anymore. We live in a system where the armed forces don't really protect the country. We live in so it's not too surprising that the medical system wouldn't be serving its advertised, proclaimed mission as well.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Absolutely. Perfect.
we're living a complete system of fraud. That's what's so, I think, disorienting when you start to look in these things and you see the continuity, the how these things kind of tie in to a
But
complete system
if
of fraud.
you're propagandized with the public school system, and even the private school system now is just as bad as the public
Hmm.
school system. So you've been taught all these lies. And so what people do is they have, let's say, a fund of knowledge, call it 100% of what they believe they know. Let's say if 99% of it is false. For someone to let go of 99% of what they believe is very traumatic.
Yeah, that type of psychic decapitation.
Exactly. And that's what
Yeah.
I went through when I lost my license. Like, whoa, the licensing board isn't there to protect patients. They're there so the government can politically take out and remove any doctor they want for any reason unrelated to medical care. And then all of a sudden my eyes opened up as to what licensure really meant. And then I said, I don't want to have another license. I don't want even a driver's license. I let that expire. So I do not lead a licensed existence.
Yeah. And that's what I try to, people will have these excuses like, well, it's there to maintain quality or make sure that people are responsible drivers, all these excuses. It's
There's
a
no
system,
evidence of that.
yeah, it's a system of control. And
Yes, and
yeah.
that's all it is. And if you look at the healthcare system as simply one more system of human control, then that really facilitates your understanding. Your understanding that the healthcare system is not broken. It's working very well, thank you. And it's simply a system of human control. It's all it is.
Mhm. It's not broken. It's doing exactly what it's supposed to do.
Correct.
Yeah, and that's where I think your experience, you're getting an MBA, helped you realize that.
Yeah,
You
well,
know,
I had a lot of
yeah,
other business experience before that.
yeah.
I was the assistant manager of the bartending agency in college. Uh, I started a junior achievement company a couple of times in high school. I started my own business when I was 10 years old, selling little plastic creepy crawlers to my classmates. So, I had a lot of different experience, and plus the indoctrination of my father is a total a cynic, I guess you could say. And so he said, the biggest crooks are the banks. And he would tell us that all the time. The biggest crooks are the banks. The biggest crooks are the banks. And then it came time to go to school, and he says, well, I got something to tell you. The teacher doesn't know anything. If she knew anything, she wouldn't be teaching. She'd be out there doing it. She's desperate for money, and that's why she's got this job. Your job is to go to school and don't interfere with her collecting her paycheck. The only reason I'm sending you is because if you don't go to the school, the government will put me in jail. So you've got to go to school, show up, don't interfere with the teacher earning her paycheck, and that's it. You might learn something, you might not. You never know. And that's how we were sent off to school,
Yeah.
which meant when the teacher gave me an F, a D, a C, an A, it didn't matter. Is dad out of jail? Good. Is she collecting a paycheck? Good. I'm done. That was it. And the grades didn't matter. And teachers were like, well, I gave you a B. Aren't you going to come and argue with me to get an A? I said, no. And for me, school was very easy. It was
Yeah.
very stress-free, right? Because I was just there. Like I said, I had two goals, and that was it. And so I figured, well, while I'm here, I might as well read the whole book in September and October, save me having to read it the rest of the year. And so I got incredibly high grades.
Mm.
And so people were puzzled. The teachers were puzzled. How is it she gets all these high grades, all these A's, but then when we throw her a curve by giving her C when she obviously deserved an A, she doesn't get upset about it? So it didn't matter. And then, of course, my father told me, he says, well, you're a little black girl. Don't worry. No one's ever going to hire you. You'll never get a job. There's no jobs for you. So I knew that it didn't matter. I could get a straight A average or a straight D average. I wasn't going to ever get a job, so I had to figure something out.
Hmm.
But more parents need to send their kids to school without the expectation that the teacher knows anything or is going to teach anything. And send the kid with the school with the expectation that what the teacher writes on that piece of paper is totally irrelevant. If your kid comes home with all F's, you shouldn't spank him. You shouldn't deprive him of privileges. And you definitely shouldn't do his homework. You need to tell him, if you can't do your homework, then you need to stop going to school right now. So that's what you do. I homeschooled my kids till they were 13. And then I said, oh, Mom, we want to go to school. Yeah, socialization. Okay, go to school. So they go to school, and they were so social. And their grades were like, they started off with A's, right, because of what they learned at home. And then the grades just plummeted. And so, of course, you get these calls and help your kid with his homework. I tell my kid, look, if I got to do your homework, then you're staying home. No one assigns me homework. I assign me homework.
Mm-hmm.
So if you can't handle doing your homework assignments, then you need to come on home. We'll continue your homeschooling. No, okay, Mom. And they go back to school and do their homework. But more parents need to treat these kids like human beings and say, look, you can't do your homework? Too bad. Figure it out. Can't figure it out? Well, I guess we got to homeschool. Let's find something you can do.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Well, education is another issue where I think a lot of people just acquiesce to the current system.
But it dovetails into the healthcare system. So, like, for example, I was a school doctor, and literally, I was ritualistically raping these kids. I was told to do a physical exam on all the boys, and every single boy I had to fondle his testicles. Supposedly, I was looking for an undescended testicle. Well, this was done at birth. There's no way it needs to be done in first grade, fourth grade, eighth grade, and 12th grade. And so these parents their kids are being stripped, they're being humiliated, they're being fondled, uh, and it's wrong. And I actually quit that job because I felt like what I was doing was wrong. This was totally unnecessary. And
Hmm.
I never found a single thing wrong with any of those kids. And these were inner city schools. So
That
that's their introduction to their body is not theirs, to allowing someone
yeah.
else to violate them. Then they have health class, which is just atrocious. It teaches them the importance of vaccines, the importance of checkups, the importance of screening exams. And so these kids are indoctrinated into the healthcare system.
This is that the full spectrum dominant system that was established by the Rockefellers. Yeah, to the school.
Or
Yeah,
whoever you want to blame it on.
yeah.
But this is health class. When I was going to school, I'm 58. When I was going to school, they didn't have health class. So this is a new thing. In the past 20 years, I couldn't believe it.
Yep.
Kids would come home, Mom, we learned this today. I said, that's not true. It's a lie. And so everything you're teaching these kids in health class is a lie and sets them up for a lifetime of paying health insurance premiums to be mutilated, tortured, and killed.
Yeah, that's. I mean,
And so the educational system is actually an important part of it.
yeah, it's because it indoctrinates them to accept this, being told what to do, what to accept the stuff without any critical thought, destroys
Yeah,
their critical
yeah.
thought. We homeschool our children too,
Excellent.
and my son was. We have these books that we get, and it's a reading comprehension, also with some history.
Hmm. Yep.
And one of them was a short little essay on the World War II memorial that was built here in Washington D.C. in the 1990s, and just a little standard paragraph on the history behind it and all that. So he used to read and answer the questions based on what's written there. And so he reads it, answers the question, gives it to me to see the answers, what he wrote. And one of the questions was, why was it built? And his answer was to trick people into joining the army.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I look at it, I go, that's not wrong, but it is reading comprehension. And I go, the answer, according to the essay, is to honor those who fought and died in World War II.
It's the
Okay.
same as his answer. It's the same answer.
And I go, but you're right.
Yeah.
You are right. That's the purpose of museums and memorials and this stuff.
But that's the importance of homeschooling.
Yeah.
If he had said that to a teacher, he would have been berated. He would have been humiliated in front of the class. A lot of other things would have happened. That would have been a very different experience.
Well, because I talk about things that I don't subject my kids to a lot of stuff because they're young. I don't want to traumatize them. You know,
Oh, please go ahead and traumatize. You'll save them the real trauma. The
but
real trauma is getting the colonoscopy at age 50. So
yeah,
yeah, go
yeah.
ahead and traumatize them with information.
So they listen to me when I talk, and I talk about voting. Voting is a waste of time. Why is it a waste of time? Because they cheat. Who counts the votes? And
Not only that, they pick the two people you choose from,
then they still cheat.
which is ridiculous. Yeah.
I, so, well, I mean, Dr. Daniels, it's been a trip, and I don't want to take any more of your time tonight. But yeah, again, I knew it would be because I've listened to your shows and read your website, and it really to listen to this stuff again. It really is it's paradigm shattering to
Yeah.
most people. Not to me because I've come into this stuff gradually over the years, so I see where you're coming from on this stuff. It really is. These systems are fraudulent. University
Yeah.
systems are fraudulent. So the
Yeah.
university is there to dumb everyone down, to indoctrinate you, to cover you in debt, so you're
A
pliable,
lifetime slave.
lifetime
Lifetime
slave.
slave. Yeah.
Same with and that's K through 12. So and the medical system isn't there to cure you. And you've
Yeah.
spelled that out. Why isn't the whole? If you don't think of it as a conspiracy, think of it as a business plan.
Yeah,
That,
it's a business plan.
yeah.
I don't think of it as a conspiracy, and it's like calling a cliff evil. No, just don't jump off the cliff. That's all. You see a cliff there, you just go the other direction.
And the system, what these systems do is not doesn't necessarily require a few psychopaths at the top, although that indeed may exist, and that cabal may exist somewhere. But these systems, corporate systems, they create a collective psychopathy because people are so compartmentalized in their thinking.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
that's what you're getting within. Much of this explains the medical system and other systems, the war systems, the Pentagon, the bureaucracies. How people can do such inhumane things, be a part of something so horrible, and be so banal about it and not care.
The other thing is it takes 18 doctors to kill one patient. And so each doctor doesn't feel like totally responsible.
Hmm.
And that's another thing is dispersing the responsibility so each person doesn't feel responsible. And I would encourage people to feel totally, completely responsible for everything in their life. And that's going to drive them to taking some serious positive action that will make them more free. It'll make them a lot wealthier and a lot healthier.
But less controllable.
But they get all the other pluses with it.
Yeah,
Yes,
but I'm
less
saying
control.
from the standpoint of the powers that be, that's a problem. Which, if you look at the wider picture, it seems to be through.
Right,
You
but
know, there's,
the powers that be are not as I think harsh as we'd like to think. I mean, in my case, I just got kicked out of the country, which is like not a bad deal. I'm having a great time in Panama.
oh yeah,
So
yeah, your car
yeah,
didn't blow up.
yes, exactly.
Some,
So
although some haven't been that lucky.
correct, right. So most people, I do believe, would be that lucky.
Yeah.
They would just simply be expelled from their present line of work into a far more pleasurable line of work with much fewer expenses and much more free time and leisure and
Yeah.
better quality of life.
I think there's a quote, I'm going to butcher it if I go by memory. I think it was by Stephen Biko. He said that the most powerful weapon the most powerful weapon in the hands of the tyrant is the mind of the slave.
Correct.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And
I
that's,
agree
yeah.
totally. And that is what is happening in the United States is people are in their condition because of what's in their mind.
Hmm. And it really is a bluff. It's a system that everyone, if they just stop, it's conscious. It's an issue of consciousness.
But not even everyone. Each individual person can set himself free irrespective of what anyone else does. You don't need to organize a movement. You
Mm.
don't need to get someone to come with you and do what you do. You can just do it yourself.
Yeah. You said it's either starting your own garden and
Yeah.
something like
Or
that.
like in my family, I have two diabetic grandfathers, one diabetic father, two diabetic siblings, and I'm not diabetic. I didn't need to start any movement. I just needed to say, hey, I'm not going to be diabetic. Let me figure out what's going on here, and I'm going to sidestep it. And that's
Hmm.
what I did.
Yeah. And yeah, just taking charge of your life, your diet, and looking at what causes it, how to prevent it, and
Hmm.
staying. You're not sipping big gulps all day, and
No,
yeah, you see that people walking down the street, waddling down the street, sipping their big gulps. You're like, oh, geez, But it just, I don't want to sound contemptuous because there's a lot I don't know. There's a lot I didn't know, a few years ago that I didn't. You do your research, you start to realize these things, and so
exactly.
you know, we're all in a state of relative ignorance. So.
Precisely. And every single day we get a little more enlightened, find out more,
Mhm.
and replace our propaganda with a few more reality or facts or useful information.
Listen, I want to thank you for coming on tonight. What is your website?
It's vitalitycapsules.com. And if you go to vitalitycapsules.com, you can click on the Candida Cleanup Report, which is now free. It's a free gift on how to use turpentine to heal yourself.
And that's a cleansing process, right? All right.
It's a cleansing
Yeah.
process, yes.
And that's turpentine. That's the turpentine, not the petro-based turpentine. It's the gum-based. Have I ever?
Yep.
Yeah, I've
Pure
read
gum
about that.
strips.
Yeah, that's that's another thing. I just someone told me about that a couple of weeks ago. I was like, wow, look into that. So, and that again, it gets rid of all the various parasites and
That's
worms
right.
that you never really take in, right? Just through the course of life, and that
Correct.
itself will make you overall healthier because it makes your body healthier, which means you just won't get as sick as often, right? More or less, right?
Well, it gets rid of these parasites, which it
Yeah.
turns out are the real cause of hypertension, diabetes, cancer, and many of our ailments we have in our modern society are caused by parasites.
Hmm.
And doctors are trained to ignore parasites and not even look for them.
Hmm. So, oh, okay. And so that's the website. Anything else you want to?
No, that's it. Just let people know that things are a lot better than you think. And freedom is literally just around the corner, and you can walk around that corner anytime you decide to.
Great. That's a nice note to end it on.
Yeah.
Talking about a grim talk, and with a nice message like that. So, listen, Alon, thank you, and maybe we'll talk again soon when you have the time. I'll send you a note. talk about something more specific. I know this is kind of a wandering conversation going from topic, but I knew it would be at least at first because I wanted to cover a lot of things and get the basics down. So,
Okay, certainly.
thanks a lot.
You're welcome. Bye bye.